And before I kind of before we kind of discuss that, how's life in China going for you? I know you're with your family there and stuff.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I enjoy living here. I'll be honest, I'd struggle to move back to the UK now. You know, I've lived permanently in China for sort of 6 years, and before that, I spent a lot of time here. And you know, I have a very comfortable life here because the overriding thing for me, my income is very up and down. So if I have a month where I get a couple of projects, I might have a good income. But if I get a month where I don't have a lot going on, my income might be pretty low, but I can still live a reasonably good life here. Like, let me give you an example. So I went out with my wife and her brother's sister and his wife a couple of days ago. So there's 5 people, 5 adults. And we went to a restaurant. It's a Korean barbecue restaurant. And there's 5 of us. And we all had plenty to eat. Korean barbecue, so it's beef and pork and salad and soup and all that kind of thing. And literally, it came to 400 RMB, which is literally like 45 to 50 pounds.
Wow.
Just no way I could do that. Last time I was in the UK, I went out with my daughter and her husband. There was 4 of us, and we went to Wagamama. Now, as you probably know, Wagamama, it's kind of like a Japanese noodle place, nothing special.
Yep.
It was over £100 for 4 people, and you know, the cost of living here is just so low. Like, I pay 4,300 RMB a month for my apartment, which is about £500 a month. It's like 160 square meters, and you don't have any council tax to pay. You know, so that rent that's it. You know.
Yep.
So I can live here way better than I could live back in the UK. I feel now as though if I move back to the UK, because I know the UK prices have gone through the roof in the last like 12 to 18 months. And I just don't think I could live a very good lifestyle there if I move back. Not that I want to move back, you know. Things here are just so much cheaper, like transport, like housing, like food. It's all cheaper.
Yeah, I can imagine. Actually, I've been to China a few times.
Okay.
I've been twice, but I'm looking to go again. Hopefully this year or next year. I'm trying to sort a few things out in UK
Yeah.
first.
Well, if you do, you know, we can meet up, man.
Yeah,
That'd be cool.
definitely. Yeah, definitely. Whereabouts in China do you live then?
I'm in Shenzhen, which is near Hong
Shenzhen.
Kong.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
nice. No, yeah, that's an amazing city,
it
Shenzhen.
certainly is. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, I'd love to kind of come in and have a coffee with you at some
Yeah, for
point.
sure.
But yeah, I remember um, I remember you were like a major celebrity in UK. You were all over the BBC papers for the
Yeah,
wrong
yeah.
reasons, and it's really funny how like how the BBC are absolutely propagandists. They've become a propaganda tool for the government,
Oh, for sure.
and here you are, doing good things for China and doing travel blogs and stuff, and they're trying to like paint you as some sort of apologist
Oh,
for China and stuff.
it's ridiculous. I mean, what
Yeah,
was really funny, I can't remember if it was the BBC or because we got covered by the BBC and the Times. And
yeah.
the Times one, the picture they used was my son Ollie, and what he'd actually done, he'd visited Shanghai because it was his birthday, and he'd got some friends in Shanghai, so he'd visited Shanghai to celebrate his birthday with his friends, and he had this picture taken on the bund with an iconic Shanghai skyline there. And they use that picture trying to say that, oh, we're living a life of luxury in China because it's paid for by the CPC. You know, it's just so ridiculous.
Oh, it's so funny. When I read the article, I just couldn't stop laughing because it was
Yeah,
you and a few others living in China, and I'm
that's
thinking,
right. Yeah. Jason and some of the
Yeah,
other guys.
and these reporters in BBC are absolutely horrendous. They never say anything good about China. They always like anything negative. They'll just say it, but they never say
For
anything
sure.
positive. Yeah, they never say anything positive or good. All the positive things that China's done. Take people out of poverty, like
Yeah,
800
yeah.
million people out of poverty, and all the renewable stuff that China's doing,
Mhm.
all the technology stuff that they're doing. Nothing good. It's always like they
It's
use
always
those words.
negative.
It's always negative, and they always put the words "or else" at the end.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
At what cost?
at what cost? Yeah,
Yeah.
or else, or totalitarian, or something like that. Or just they're like, and even pictures. They like you said, they try to blacken the skies as well. When it's a bright
Yeah,
sunny
yeah.
day, they try and make it very grey, and it's horrible. Uh,
Just like quickly say hello to. I see Angelo has joined in on the Twitter Spaces. I know Angelo. Angelo's a really good guy. If you don't know Angelo, you need to follow him because he's an excellent. He does some stuff with Brian Baletic. He also does his own stuff. So he's a great guy. I can see he's just joined in the
yeah, he
conversation on
has.
Twitter.
Yeah, I've added him as co-host. Hopefully,
Yeah,
uh,
he's a good guy. He's Angelo.
yep.
Yeah,
Uh,
let's get on to the geopolitics, and you know, I just want to raise something. So there was an article in it's either the Washington Post or the New York Times a couple of days ago, which was almost saying that you know, Chinese people are allowed too much free speech. They're being anti-Semitic, and I'm thinking, you know, and look, this is my view, right? All the Chinese people I know here, and I know quite a few, I speak to them, and literally most of them are on the side of the Palestinians. And it's not they're on the side of the Palestinians because they're on the side of the Palestinians. It's they're on the side of the Palestinians because they can actually see what's actually happened. They can see that Israel, backed by the US, the UK, and parts of Europe, are actually on the wrong side of the argument here. It's not that, you know, and it like blows American media's mind that they're like have a different thought to what America think they should have, you know. And I just it's just absolutely crazy that they go down this road of like, oh well, you know, how dare Chinese think that, you know, opposite to what we think. It's just ludicrous, man.
yeah, that's what they want. They want the whole world to be subservient to them. They want
For sure.
they want all the major countries to follow their rules-based order, and that's the problem. When you have independence, sovereignty, they just don't like it, and they class you as an enemy.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, anybody with half an ounce of common sense can see how bad the Palestinian people in Gaza have been treated for not just, you know, the people seem to think it all started a few months ago, and it didn't. It's been going on for years and years and years. You know, they've been literally prisoners in Gaza for so many years, and really it's disgraceful. And for, you know, how many people have been killed so far? 25,000. And yet literally America just back it, you know, along with the puppy dog UK. You know, it's just I don't know what to say. I find it unbelievable that people don't see the reality of the situation.
Sure, we'll cover UK in a bit. We'll come to
Mm-hmm.
those puppets, but yeah, 25,000 is probably confirmed dead, but there's also thousands of people like not confirmed under rubble, and there's probably a lot of them blown up by
For
by
sure.
bombs and stuff. They can't recognize who they are, and also there's many people dying every day because of these humanitarian issues as well that's
Mm-hmm.
going on. So yeah, that number could be well over
It'd be
100,000 by end of the month.
easily, yeah. I mean, and as well, it's just ridiculous how you've got the West now. They've stopped funding to literally the major organization that you know delivers aid into that area, and you've got they've stopped funding them. It's just
Yeah.
unbelievable, they really should be ashamed of themselves. I find it incredible how British people, are not I know there's big demonstrations going on there, and I know there's big demonstrations going on in America, but these demonstrations should be way bigger,
Exactly, and also this reminds me of the Beijing Winter Olympics. If you remember the Winter Olympics, they did the exactly same thing. The US said they're going to boycott it. Then all of their puppet states started boycotting the games one by one,
Yeah,
and it's the same lot, same people, same countries, and now they're doing it with the UN. It's basically a coordinated approach. Basically, like you guys
sure.
are the puppets. You all need to do this at the same time, whatever we do. You need to sanction Russia, same as we do. Blah blah
Yeah,
blah. And it's just a collective West plus Japan as well,
yeah.
uh, which is another country we can probably talk about later on. But
Vassal state to the US, yeah.
yeah. But yeah, absolutely crazy that what they're doing. I wanted to talk to you about this picture, really, this hideous thing that happened yesterday, where you had plainclothes Mossad members going into an hospital. This is in West Bank, by the way, not in
Uh-huh.
Gaza.
Oh,
They went
really?
into
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, so they went into the hospital dressed as plainclothes, medical officers, doctors, and one of them was in a wheelchair, and they pulled out their guns and they killed three members, three Palestinians, and one of them was in a coma. I'm not joking. One of them was in a
My
coma,
God.
and they shot him in cold blood, and the other two were seriously injured, and obviously they were in the hospital beds. Killed them in cold blood, and then walked out. And obviously, these guys are all wearing plain clothes, so they could have been anyone,
My
walking into
God.
the hospital, and they could have been anyone, and they just shot them and just walked off. And
Well, this just
they're not even Hamas members. These are like Palestinians we're talking about here.
Yeah, I mean, how low can you go? How low can Israel go? It's just unbelievable. It's hard to find words to describe that, isn't it? Really,
Yeah,
it's really disgusting.
sure.
Um,
I want to get Angelo on this and see what his thoughts
yeah,
are.
yeah. Let's bring
Angelo,
Angelo in.
what are your thoughts about what happened yesterday?
Hi, Angelo. Thank you. Thank you. It gets lower.
This Zionist Australian, and I replied to him, well, you bragging about what? Well, you have nothing to brag about. You're doing carpet bombing on civilians. You are killing babies. You are humiliating civilians on a daily basis. But what? You have nothing to brag about. You're doing carpet bombing on civilians. You are killing babies. You are humiliating civilians on a daily basis at checkpoints, and now you just killed a person that was in a coma. Is that what? This is not an army. It's not an army, really. And when you look at the morality, the Zionist, I see like those TikTok videos, and then I see on the other side two different personalities. One is really lacks completely morality. There's this, what I call the spiritual void. It's empty. It is completely empty. And on the other side, you have people where you have all the qualities you can imagine in one person. Those qualities that makes you a human being. You love your family. You have faith. You have tradition. You have religion, and you have, and really, and I don't want to make to have those messianic way of talking, like good versus evil. But I mean, Zionists really embody the evil, the worst you can have in a human being. And I feel sad to talk about this. And I think the essence of this movement is very actually anti-Semitic, because it doesn't deserve the cause of Jews. Most of them, they're just a fraud, really, because they're not even, they are Europeans converted into Judaism, a few hundred years ago. They're not even from that land. So there's a lot to talk about, but it's just a bit shocking. I don't see the
Yes,
bottom,
yes, yes.
really. And what scares me is that it's generalized. I don't know if you remember when you had the Germans after
Yeah,
World War II. Most Germans were shocked about
they're
the
cheering it
Holocaust.
on.
They really
Yeah,
didn't know. I do believe.
Yes,
it's
yes, yes.
unbelievable.
But what happens is that you have more Zionists. They actually, it's not enough for them. If you listen to what they
Yeah,
say, it is not enough. They are
they're cheering it on.
exactly.
No
So
worries, Angelo.
yeah, I
It's
mean
good to
that's
speak
my
to you,
my
man.
my opinion on that. By the way, I'm just passing by. When I saw you on this panel, I was like, I just wanted to say hello. I just have
Take
to
care,
leave very
Angelo.
shortly
Bye-bye.
now. But
No
Bye.
worries, Angelo. It's good to speak to you,
yeah,
man.
good to speak to you, and keep it up. I have to get going, AJ. So thanks for inviting me, and
No
you
problem.
guys keep
No
it up.
problem. All right. Thanks,
Okay.
Angelo. Appreciate it. Thanks.
So
Take
there's
care,
a couple
you guys
of
take care.
people
Bye-bye.
on Spaces who requested they might want to speak. Silly and Yoshi.
Yeah, yeah. We'll add them at the end. I think I wanted to have a conversation with you
Okay,
first.
no problem.
All right. Thanks, Angelo. Appreciate it.
So there's a couple of people on Spaces who requested they might want to speak. Silly and Yoshi.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
hearing
We'll
you on the
add
phone at
them
the moment.
Okay, so I wanted to kind of talk about UK now, and basically, what's your thoughts on what Sunak is doing? And obviously, this guy is going around bombing Yemen with no international law, no UN Security Council go ahead, no British Parliament go ahead. Obviously, the British Parliament didn't really say anything. They were just they're all up for it. So, what's your thoughts on Britain's role as a major puppet of United States and what they're doing? They are
Okay.
complicit, right, to everything that's going on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think first of all, I'd like to say you have Sunak, who's a prime minister that wasn't actually voted in. So this business where the UK think they're democratic, that is just a bit of a farce to me, because Sunak has that job just because there was literally nobody else to take it. He's now come in, and I've thought that for many years, many years, that Britain just doesn't have its own independent foreign policy. And we've seen this, on occasions. We saw it with Huawei. And if you go back when Vince Cable was in government at the time of that Huawei decision, he actually now says, we got rid of Huawei not because of any security issues, because we were told to by the US. And this is the same now. It's like whatever the US do, for some reason, Britain seem to think they have to follow or join in. And I actually feel that the US, back in the day, yeah, we were a lot more powerful, but over the last 50 years or so, we've lost that power. But for some reason, the leaders still think, we can take on the world along with America. And I think it's just ridiculous. I mean, I hear that, you know, the ex-Prime Minister Boris Johnson now is talking about, young people need to get ready for, you know, to be conscripted into the army because we might have a war with Russia. But just going back to the bombing Yemen to try and dissuade the Houthis, I think it's just ridiculous. You know, the Houthis are a hardened group. They've been in war for many years, and you know, the whole reason why they're doing what they're doing is because of what's going on in Gaza. But the UK seem to think these are two completely separate issues. You know, and I find that hard to get my head around. It's almost as if these people are on some sort of different planet with their thinking. I mean, to me, I'm just a layman, and I can see as clear as day that the reason the Houthis in Yemen are doing what they're doing is because of the situation in Gaza. You know, they're standing with the Palestinians. It's as simple as that, you know.
Yeah, you're 100% right, Lee. And you know, I remember when Huawei first came out in UK, and you know, after President Xi came to UK, there was a huge exchange of technology, and lots of Chinese companies moving to UK. And Huawei was one of the first. And I remember the flagship store they opened in Westfield in Stratford. And I actually bought a Huawei phone that day when they opened, and I know a lot about China, and I knew the Huawei phones were actually better than iPhones, or they were outselling out iPhones at the time. So I bought a Huawei phone. It was an amazing phone, and then it didn't even last me a few months, and then suddenly Boris Johnson decides to, you know, sanction it, and I was like, oh my god, what the hell are these guys doing? And yeah, I mean, I know the story. I mean, Trump basically called up Boris Johnson, and he basically started shouting at him over the phone, and Boris Johnson said, "Yeah, all right, whatever you say, master," and he basically threw away all the evidence that, you know, I mean, Britain did their own. This wasn't like an overnight thing. They spent years going
Oh,
through.
for sure.
Yeah, they spent years like going through the Huawei technology and making sure there's no security risks. And they also spent years putting up all the Huawei masts as well, the 5G masts. They spent like 100 over like 100 billion just putting up all of these 5G masts. And then Boris just decides to throw it all away in one day.
Yeah.
And still to this day, Barrett, they're still taking these masts out. They are still spending billions trying to take them out.
Yeah,
And funny thing is, we don't even have 5G yet. We don't have anything near 5G. And some companies claim they have 5G, but it's not true 5G. It's what you call 4.5G, because the companies that have replaced Huawei, they're not true 5G. It's not true 5G technology. But I mean, in 5G in China, you know, you could download. I'm hearing speeds of 300 megabits.
Oh, it's very fast here.
Very fast. Yeah, it's about 100 to 300 times faster than UK. And
I think that the key is as well, it's not so much just the speed, it's the coverage. Like, I can travel on the subway, I've got 5G connection. I can be in fairly remote areas, I've still got 5G connection. You know, I live in the middle of Xinjiang, and it's one of the best covered areas. You just never have an issue with the signal whatsoever. And I was just amazed. Last time I was back in the UK, which was in May of last year, my parents live near Peterborough, which is it's not a massive city, but it's a fairly substantial city in the UK. And I was in a Tesco's, and I couldn't get a signal on my phone, you know. It's like, what? I just couldn't believe it. And when I'm at my parents' home, they have the fastest. They're literally 5 to 10 kilometers out of the center of Peterborough, and the internet is so slow. And they've got the best package they can get in their area. And it's like, I feel like I've gone back 10 years, because like over here, it's like everything's like super fast. I've got fiber to my apartment. You know, I've got crazy fast upload and download speeds. And it's just, Southeast Asia and especially China are really overtaking the UK and Europe for sure with communications.
Yeah, and not many people understand how amazing 5G is. I mean, you're able to do amazing things with that speed. For example, you can do remote operations as well. Obviously, remote driving, autonomous driving, but then also there's all these other applications you can do as well, like you can. Uh, I think there's a mining as well, 5G mining. But
Yeah,
but the main thing is, imagine a company using 5G technology to transfer data across, and how much time you would save. You know,
for sure. Yeah.
if you're a company like moving data from one site to another, like and you're running batch jobs overnight, for example, and you have to move it across the network. Imagine the time that you would save, and obviously with business, time is money, right? I mean,
For
if you're
sure.
if you're a business and you want to get these data across from one site to another, the faster you can do that, the more money you could make, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah, if instead of waiting, you're
You would
gone.
be amazed at some of the deployments over here. I mean, I've been to see factories where the factories are running on 5G technology, and they've got like multiple streams of HD video that are doing quality control. So there's one domestic appliance brand here called MIDI, and they have a factory, and it's one of the most modern manufacturing plants in the world, and it produces a domestic appliance something like every 3 seconds, and literally the whole factory runs on 5G. So like all the quality inspection, they have these HD cameras that scan everything. It uploads it across a 5G network and then crunches it in a cloud computer in real time to say, yeah, there's no imperfections with this panel or this part. Just amazing, honestly. It really blows your mind what they're doing here.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to kind of visit it when I go there. But yeah, I regularly go on the train, Lee, and especially in
Brilliant.
London Central Line. And when I'm on the Underground, I get no signal whatsoever, no internet access. I don't know if you've been on the Central Line in London.
I've been on. I stayed out. I don't know what line it was, but last time I was in London, I stayed near the O2 Arena, and we
Oh
got the
yeah,
line into central London, and I couldn't get a signal at all.
yeah, yeah.
I
You
couldn't
can't get.
even get a signal at some of the stations.
Yeah, yeah, it's absolutely horrible. Especially when I used to work from one end of London to another, I used to travel on the Central Line to go from one end, from the east to the west,
Uh-huh.
and the train journey was 2 hours, exactly 2 hours, and I had no signal, so I'm just there staring at people's faces. It was so boring.
Oh my God.
You can
Yeah.
imagine what every morning would feel like. I used to just twiddle my thumb, thinking, "What the hell am I going to do?" Like, and all
Well,
you
it's
do is just stare at people's faces. Nothing more to
yeah,
do.
it's totally different here. Like I go on the we call it a metro system here. We don't call it an underground or a subway. Some people call it subway, but it's generally known as the metro system. And literally, I go on there, and you've got most of the guys will be gaming,
Yeah,
and most of the girls will be. They're either taking selfies and post them on Instagram, or they're looking at Instagram, or they're watching some like drama, some Chinese drama. But literally, you can stream 4K HD footage on the metro here without a problem. And
wow,
even when you're moving at like 80, 100 kilometers an hour, it's still not an issue. And most of the high speed trains now have Wi-Fi on as well, so you can stream uh, onto there as well. So it's not an issue here. It's very rare here that I get anywhere without a connection. I have once or twice, but in a very rural area. I was like in some mountains once, and you may lose a signal for like a minute or two. That's it.
sure. So I want to kind of move on to
Mhm.
Iran right now, and obviously,
Okay.
last few days there's been some escalations, and obviously 3 US soldiers died in
Yeah,
Syria. By the way, it's not in Jordan like they said. So they
that's
are there.
correct. Yeah,
They are there illegally in Syria.
for sure.
But the press in the United States and in UK, they like to paint out that they're there legally in Jordan, which is not true. But there's been some escalations happening over the last few days, and
Mhm.
Biden has been moving some military across, and there's been some talk coming out from the White House, especially people like Lindsey Graham.
Yeah.
But the Biden White House have been kind of playing it down, saying we don't want a war with Iran and stuff. But I mean, do you think they're going to be that stupid enough to attack Iran? What's your thoughts?
Well, I think that, like you say, they've been moving some military equipment there. I believe the UK have as well. I believe the
Yeah,
UK have sent some refueling tankers there to assist American bombers and fighter jets. Now, I think that they will attack Iran because I think there's people, you've got the neocons in like the John Boltons and these kind of people. They've been itching for a long time to attack Iran. But I think they will, and I think if they do, that will be a catastrophic mistake because I think that will kick off a much bigger, Iran and not the Iran that is 10 years ago. They have much more sophisticated weapons. They have a lot of Russian equipment. In fact, Iran were even supplying drone technology to Russia, as far as I'm aware. But I think that there's too many voices in the US that have wanted to attack Iran for a long, long time. And I heard some rumor today that possibly this attack on this American base may even be a false flag incident to give the US the excuse to attack Iran.
yeah.
Now, I'm not backing that. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it wouldn't surprise me if that was the case. It really wouldn't.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And I don't know if you can see the screen, but this is a
I
map of
can.
it. Yeah, this is a map of Iran, and the green line is basically their missile capability, how far their
Mhm.
missiles can go. And you can see that covers not only the Strait of Hormuz, but also the Red Sea and Israel and all the US military bases inside that area.
Mhm.
And Iran has been building up its stockpile, its missiles, since the 1980s. Because if you remember when Iran had a major war with Iraq at the time,
Yes.
and Iraq was, at that time, Saddam was being heavily armed by the West.
Mhm.
So they were arming Iraq to basically attack Iran. And Iran has been on kind of war footing since the 1980s. So everything they've built is pretty much them for themselves, and they built a huge arsenal of missiles. We're talking, we're talking about 100,000 missiles they've kind of
Whoa.
amassed over the years.
Uh-huh.
Um, so they can pretty much defend themselves, especially with the missiles. But I wanted to kind of talk to you about China's role because China, a couple of years ago, has agreed to a 400 billion deal with Iran, where
Yeah.
they would build infrastructure. They would also supply some technology,
Uh-huh.
and also uh, in return they would give cheap oil and gas to
Correct.
China. And this cheap oil and gas is actually is not done in dollars, so it's done in Chinese yuan.
Yeah.
And so obviously they circumvent the dollars, and they also obviously save more money because they don't have to pay the dollar fees. The problem with
Sure.
the dollar is it all depends on the interest rate. So if the interest rates are high, that the dollar becomes very very strong and expensive.
Yeah.
So the exchange rate gets very expensive as well. So do you think China will let Iran fall based on how much investment China has put in? Because Iran is very important to China, right? Not only do they provide cheap oil and gas, but in terms of geopolitics, they're, if there's any future conflict with China and the US try to block oil and gas into China, Iran's would be the only point of call. For example, oil from Saudi Arabia has to go for the Malacca Strait, so the US can easily block that. But Iran seems to be the only point of call, and Russia, obviously, where they can actually get oil and gas. So Iran seems to be very important to China in a geopolitical way, and also gives access to China to the rest of the world, because
For
obviously the
sure.
Belt and Road is going through there.
Yeah.
So do you think China will let Iran fall? Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I don't think that China would get involved directly in a conflict at all. That's just not in their nature. But I think they would support them financially. I think they would probably support them with weapons, potentially. I think China will do a lot that's kind of a bit more stealth. Like, I'm pretty sure that they're supporting Russia to a large degree, but it will never be open. But where I think there's a lot of double standards is that you look at the West, the way they support Ukraine, billions and billions of dollars of weapons. Yet they turn around to China and say, "Oh, don't you dare supply Russia with anything." But I think a lot of support is under the table. That's my feeling. I know the Chinese are generally supportive of Russia, but I think the Chinese want to be. Their philosophy is to do business. If you look at Afghanistan now, right? Afghanistan are getting more infrastructure in the last year and a half since America have, ran away than they did in the 10 plus however many years America were there, because China goes in and they're not worried so much about the politics in that country. They think, well, that's left to Afghanistan. That's their thing. We just want to do business. We want to do deals with you. We'll build you infrastructure in exchange for your resources. Now, you mentioned that obviously oil has to be shipped from Iran, and that goes through some choke points which the US potentially can control. But personally, I think the US, if they attack Iran, are biting off more than they can chew. I mean, they obviously thought they were going to defeat Russia swiftly and easily. They thought the sanctions were going to bring Russia to its knees. Now, Russia have proved that they can withstand the sanctions. Their economy is growing. And not only that, Russia's industrial capacity, I think, has absolutely surprised America and the West. Now, if you think Russia have a large industrial capacity, you ain't seen nothing to what China have got. China can manufacture huge amounts of anything in a very short space of time. And I'm pretty sure probably a lot of the components that Russian drones are using and Russian military equipment that's being built, I'm sure a lot of those raw components are coming from China. And I think exactly the same would be with Iran. If, I think you're right. China wouldn't let Iran fall easily. I don't think Iran would fall anyway. I think Iran are pretty strong now. Like you say, they have a lot of missiles. They have a lot of military equipment. They're much, much stronger than they were like 10 or 15 years ago. I think the USA are the ones that underestimate their adversaries big time.
Yeah, and also looking at the map, Iran can pretty much block Red Sea and the Strait of Hormuz at the same time. So imagine the cost of shipping that have to go through Africa, all around Africa, and it's going to add thousands and thousands of dollars per ship. And
Yeah,
insurance companies are not going to cover it as well. So this is going to cause huge amounts of global inflation.
it is. Well, it's
And
quite interesting, AJ. My wife works for a global shipping company here in China. And so she's in touch with this. She gets these like memos every day. And I don't know if you're aware, but if for Chinese registered ships, they're okay to go through the Red Sea, because China have done a deal. And a few days or a week ago, America apparently contacted China and says, "Look, we've been bombing Yemen and it really hasn't worked out for us. Can you help us? Can you talk to these groups in Yemen to try and And apparently now some foreign ships are even trying to get Chinese crews
yeah,
so they can sail through. It's just
yeah, that's right, that's right. And
unbelievable.
yeah, and what I found funny was there was a ship. There was a U.S. ship which had a crew of Indians in it, and
Uh-huh.
this was a few days ago, and they were basically just off the coast of Yemen, and I heard the recording. I'll need to kind of show it to you. I don't have it on me, but it's a really funny recording where the Yemenis were talking to these guys from India, and they were talking to them, and it's a British ship, but it's run by Indians, and the India guy says, "Oh, we're basically we're coming from India or something," and just to prove that they're neutral. But
Uh-huh.
guess what? They still got bombed because the fact that they were Indian, plus it was on a British ship, and
Ah.
and people in the comment section were saying basically India has been standing with Israel with all of this as well, because Israel, I mean, India has not been exactly neutral. A lot of people are saying that, India is basically sending 100,000 Indians to work in Israel, and these Indians are going to be replacing the Palestinians that used to work there.
Wow.
And also, India's going to be Modi himself said that he stands with Israel. He didn't even mention Palestine when he made this speech as well. And
Yeah.
plus, you see a lot of Indians on social media. They're all kind of standing for Israel for some reason. But yeah, I think it goes to. I think I think the relationship between India and Israel is actually a good one, because Israel has been selling a lot of weapons to India as well. And also India has got the same problem that Israel has, mainly because mainly Muslim extremism, and obviously
Uh-huh.
India deals with the Kashmir issue, and they deal with a lot of Muslims there. Now, obviously, overhanded tactics. I'm not going to say much more, but let's just say they're not exactly human rights. They don't follow human rights, basically.
Yeah, I mean,
Way.
well, yeah, that just on that point, AJ. I mean, this is how ridiculous it gets. So, as you know, for the last 3, 4, 5 years, the West have been claiming there's this genocide going on in Xinjiang in China, and they're still trying to push that narrative. And I found it unbelievable that a couple of weeks ago in the United Nations, Israel voted against China, saying they're committing, human rights abuses in Xinjiang when
Yeah,
they're doing what they're doing in Gaza. I mean, you
yeah,
literally couldn't make this shit up,
yeah, yeah,
And it's the same with the UK. You
yeah.
have, I mean, you've got David Cameron now. He's foreign secretary. He's lording it around. I actually used to quite like Cameron when he was
Yeah,
prime
me
minister.
too.
I thought he
Yeah,
was a
me
good
too.
prime minister, but I,
Yeah,
I've heard him recently since he's become foreign secretary and think, my God, what's happened to you, David
yeah,
Cameron? Because like
yeah,
you're on the wrong side of things now. It's like honestly, I haven't personally been to Xinjiang. I hope to go this year. I've tried to go a number of times, but during COVID and there was all sorts of problems. But I know many people. I actually know 2 people that lived there, grew up there. And I know many Western friends here who've actually been. And yes, the security was up, because that was what was happening, is you had a bunch of radicals that were actually trained outside of Xinjiang. And it's rumored that they were funded by CIA. Then they were sent back into Xinjiang to basically stir up trouble. And there was a number of terrorist attacks there. And the actual fact is that for a while, the Chinese authorities kind of kept it on a low profile. Then what happened? At some point, this terrorism broke outside of Xinjiang and started happening in other areas of China. There was an incident in Beijing. There was a big incident in Kunming. And at that point, the Chinese authorities said, right, enough is enough. And they had to crack down, and they weeded all those extremists out. Now, maybe during that time, there was probably a few people who didn't do that much wrong who got caught up in the dragnet, but that's no different to anywhere else in the world. But they sorted the problem out. They put huge amounts of money into the Xinjiang area, huge amounts of money to develop the economy, because what they realized is that these young people who were growing up, who, 17, 18, there isn't a lot of prospects of getting a job or earning money. They were the ones that were being recruited by these radicals. So what the authorities did is they created an environment where these young people do have a bright future. So now they say, oh, right, I can get a job, I can earn for my family. And you see Xinjiang now, and they have a good life, man. They have a good standard of living. Even Tesla opened a dealership there. There's people with enough money to buy Teslas. Now, Teslas are quite expensive in China. Actually, they've just cut the price because their market share is dropping a bit now. But, they're not poor anymore, because China have put huge amounts of money into that region to make a good economy there. So what do then the America do? They start playing the forced labor card.
Yep.
Which is absolute nonsense. It really is.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And they say they claim that they really care about the Muslims in Xinjiang, and what did they do? They just sanctioned them, and they stop all Western companies from buying goods from there, and opening up offices there. But it doesn't really stop China, because there's no way to basically distinguish if you're from that area or not, because all the goods made in China say made in China, right? They're not going to say made in Xinjiang, or we made this with forced labor.
Yeah,
they're not going to say that. Everything's going to be made in China. And some of the things that are in Xinjiang is basically the solar panels. They make that over there.
Yeah, that's a big
industry, and the whole world needs solar panels, and they also make a lot of cotton, and
tomatoes are a big thing there.
Cotton,
raisins and fruit is a massive thing there. And AJ, the other thing that absolutely blows my mind is you'll get most of these Westerns, they think that's where Muslims are in China. They're in Xinjiang. Now, yeah, there is a lot, but there's also a lot of non-Muslims there. But there's also a lot of Muslims all over China. Within literally 15 minutes walk of where I live in Shenzhen, there's literally 5 or 6 restaurants that are operated by Uyghurs or Muslim people. And they cook some great food, man. We often go and eat there because, and they set up their businesses because people like their food, and it's very authentic food. They cook the authentic breads and authentic lamb. And it's just, the West, it's such bullshit that they pump out about Muslims and China, and, there's a guy on Twitter, I forget his name now, he shows like that. He lives in Guangzhou. He goes to Muslim prayer. You know, nobody stops that.
Yeah.
You know what when people say, "Oh, religion is banned in China," China don't ban religion; they ban cultism. So if you're preaching something that's like radicalism, then they will stop that. But if you're just preaching, you know, Buddhism, Christianity, you know, any other, you know, mainstream religion, China don't have a problem with that. You know, it's just that unbelievable how the West think. You know, there's churches in Shenzhen, there's mosques all over China, no problem.
Yeah, and there's some really cool facts. There's more mosques in China than there is in the entire continent of Asia and Eurasia, basically. So if you
There's
include,
loads.
yeah, if you include in India and Central Asia and Europe and even even Middle East, if you count all of the mosques there, there's actually more mosques, you know, per area in China than there are all of that combined. Because I've read that there's around I think 300,000 mosques or something in China.
I'm not sure the number, but there's a lot.
Yeah, and I actually, when I went to China, I actually traveled around China, and one of the places I traveled to was Gansu in Lanzhou, I think they said
Lanzhou,
it,
yeah.
Lanzhou, yeah. And you, people don't realize Lanzhou is actually a Muslim city. I mean, there's more Muslims living in Lanzhou than there are Han Chinese, and there's more mosques in Lanzhou than there are in Shanghai or Beijing, for example.
Yeah.
Because Lanzhou is like the main city where all the rich Muslims come to trade with the rest of China. So all the rich Muslims that come from Xinjiang and other parts of even our parts of the world like Pakistan and Iran and Middle East, they all come to Lanzhou because Lanzhou is like a very like Muslim friendly city. It's got halal food everywhere, and plus loads of Muslims, loads of mosques as well. But then it's not far from Beijing as well, not far from other major cities, so you can easily trade with the rest of China. So you know people don't know that Lanzhou is actually there's more Muslims living there than Han Chinese.
You go all over China and then there's Muslim people, and not only that, there's lots of other China has like 50 plus minorities, and this notion that the West have that China are trying to get rid of minorities. I've been to many places where the government actually do a lot and fund a lot of like programs so minorities can keep their ethnicity, they can keep their traditions, and that goes on all over the place. I have a very good friend, a Chinese woman in Shenzhen. She's a Christian. She goes to church every week, no problem. I don't personally know any practicing Muslims here. Oh, actually, Ollie does. Ollie had he's got a friend who lives here, originally from Manchester, a guy named Z or Zia. And I think he's a practicing Muslim. He lives in Shenzhen. It's Chinese people actually don't really. Religion's not a big thing for Chinese people. They're either Taoist or Buddhist, but they don't care what other religion other people are.
Yeah.
They don't make a big thing about it. If you want to be whatever religion, that's your thing. As far as I'm concerned, you're just another person. Doesn't matter what religion you support. That doesn't bother Chinese people. It's very, very different to the West, where in the West it's used as like a sort of thing to attack each other almost.
Yep.
But it's not in China. And from my experiences around China, I see no persecution of a particular religion or faith or minority at all.
Yeah, it's just stories coming out of the West, because the only reason they're doing it because they do not want to show that there is a system out there better than theirs, and that's the scary thing for all the neocons. Because if that happen, if people see that the Chinese system is working better, then you will see a lot of countries moving towards that system, and this is bad for their democracy because
For
they
sure.
they use democracy as a weapon, right? I mean,
All
they
the time.
basically they use democracy to put in puppet governments in place, puppet leaders, because in order, if you're a democracy, you need more than one party. And how the US runs the world, if they don't like a certain party, they get rid of them somehow,
Yeah.
like Imran Khan, for example.
Yeah, yeah.
And they'll replace them with a bunch of puppets. They'll replace them with people like Milei, and you have in Argentina, you have that puppet in Philippines, you have that
Yeah.
puppet in South Korea. All they have to do is put in a lot of money to a candidate, because to win an election you need a lot of money and a lot of backing, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So they just fill them up with money, fill up the coffers, say, you know what, go out there and and they'll obviously endorse that person as well, and that person will win because the person that wins is one with the most money, because more money you have, the more marketing you can have,
For
the
sure.
more advertising you can have, and more you
You're
can knock them.
absolutely right, AJ. Absolutely spot on. And that's why, I always think that a government should be judged on its results. Yeah. So, my experiences of the UK, because that's where I lived for many years. And like before every election, they will have their manifesto, this list of promises, right? But most of the time, after they've done their 4.5 or 5 years, how many of those manifesto pledges have they achieved? Very few.
Yeah.
Whereas I see here in China, they have this 5-year plan. And at the end of that 5-year plan, most of those objectives have been achieved, and they deliver for the people. And I often like people keep going, oh, democracy, this Western democracy is the best system. Now, I would argue that if you go back to the 1980s, India, which has a so-called Western democracy, their economy was the same size as China's. Fast forward to now, and China's economy is 8 times bigger. So clearly, the Chinese system has worked. I don't know what else to say, really. The results speak for themselves. A majority of Chinese that you speak to who are over 30 now say our lives are way, way better than they were 10, 15, 20 years ago. The standard of living here has increased. Now, that's not to say there's no poor people in China. Of course there are. There's poor people everywhere. But the amount of people who've had their standard of living lifted runs into hundreds of millions. And I've seen this. I've traveled around China. I've seen this with my own eyes. I've spoken to people who've reap the benefits from this. And look at, you go back to India, there's still 500 million people who live in dire poverty in India, compared to how many people now live in poverty in China at almost zero. When I first came to China almost 20 years ago, I would see lots of people begging on the streets in Guangzhou. Now I go to Guangzhou, I see almost none.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I gotta put it out there, because imagine if China did what Israel is doing to Palestine right now, because
Oh
obviously
my God.
you see how Israel is dealing with extremists, and you see how China is dealing with it. And China has not killed anyone, not bombed any city in Xinjiang, not killed any. I mean, imagine if they flattened Kashgar or something like that,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
just to get a few extremists. I mean, the whole world would be like in up in arms, saying, "Oh my God, look what China's doing!
Exactly.
These guys are evil." But when Israel does it, is we
it's okay.
just look the
Yeah,
other way,
yeah,
pretend
yeah.
let's pretend nothing's happening. But yeah, it's just one rule for one country, another rule for another. But you see what China's doing, right? Whatever they've done, it's worked, right? There's not been any terrorism attacks for more than
Correct.
20 years. No one's been killed. No one's house has been bombed. No, and people are generally happy. People are generally living their lives. And nobody believes this story about genocide in China. I mean, they try to. It's what you call deflection, Lee. It's
For sure.
you have a genocide going on, but you try to deflect it and blame another country for it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but people are not stupid. I mean, you see, nobody's really. Everyone's really ignoring it, and the Muslim world is not stupid. They can see what's going on in front of their eyes. You can see a real genocide live stream. You can see like people, kids, women dying every single day on like X and other social media platforms. But you see none of that in Xinjiang because
No,
it doesn't exist.
exactly.
And you can't say it does. You can't say nobody's got a phone, right? Everyone's got a phone. And
Absolutely.
in Palestine, Israelis have blocked the internet. They have blocked all the power. So, but people in Palestine are still able to send.
The
They're still
data's
able to,
still getting
yeah.
out.
They're still able to send data out. So you're telling me nobody in Xinjiang can send data out of any genocide that's going on, and
It's
and
just nonsense,
it's
isn't
just
it?
nonsense. And they're saying
It
that
really is.
and they're saying like there's 3 million people locked up or something. 3 million people is a quarter of the population of
Yeah,
Xinjiang,
yeah.
and also 3 million is more than the US has people in prison. So you're talking about 3 million number. You have more people apparently locked up that nobody knows about, more than like what the US prison population. US prison population is 2.8 million or something. But it's more. It's absolutely crazy, the numbers.
Oh, it's
They,
ridiculous. Whenever you push these people on these things, they can never come up with credible responses. And what I find is certainly on X, they will just resort to personally insulting you because they can't raise a credible argument. It's very easy if somebody talks about genocide in Xinjiang. Just ask them, well, how many people, where's your evidence of how many people have been killed? Because there isn't any, and exactly like you say, AJ, in this day and age, literally, especially in China, everybody's got phones, there's fast data connections everywhere. The internet would be absolutely flooded with
yeah,
pictures and film if there was something going on. And the other thing, right, whenever there's a genocide if there was a genocide in a country, wouldn't those people be trying to flee to the border?
exactly.
Yeah, there's
It's, it's
X
a
million people in Xinjiang, but I don't see
yeah.
any of them running and trying to cross the borders. Xinjiang borders a lot of other countries, but nobody's running to the borders. Does that
That's
not
right.
strike people as very strange?
Yeah, that's like it's like London. If a quarter of the London population was suddenly put in concentration camps, what do you think the other 3/4 are going to do? They're going to run for their life.
Exactly.
They're going to exit
Yeah,
London,
yeah.
right?
Absolutely, it's just ludicrous, and I find it unbelievable that you'll have people that keep arguing this. There's people they'll get a photograph of a prison in China and go, look, this is where they lock people up. Well, yeah, the same as anywhere else. You do have criminals in China as well who go to prison. It's just kind of normal, like anywhere else. And then they have things like I just give you this example. So a number of years ago in China, there was an incident at a kindergarten where some mentally disturbed guy went in and attacked a load of kids with a knife, right? So after that, the Chinese authorities says, right, we can't let this kind of thing happen again. So what we will do, we will put security at schools. So they build some higher barbed wire fences around schools. And then most schools in China, they have like security personnel at the front. Now, where the school my stepdaughter goes to, if me and my wife just turn up at that school, we won't be allowed in. Okay. You have to make an appointment to go into the school so they know who it is that's coming. Then you have to show your ID to the security guard and then you let in. Now, that is to protect the children. It's not to stop the children getting out, which is the way the West portray it. It's just because they don't understand how things are done in China. I live in an apartment complex. There's a security guard on the gate. My wife's brother-in-law came to visit me one day, and the security guard knew that I was here on my own without my wife, and the security guard wouldn't let my wife's brother in because he didn't know who he was. Now that's good in a way for me. It was not a problem. I went down to the gate and said, no, I know this guy is fine to come in. But that security guard was trying to look after my interest by not letting somebody he didn't know into the complex. So when you know how things like this work in China, you understand. But these Westerners who've never been here don't understand it. So they misconstrue all these narratives and turn them into a negative, where actually a lot of them are a positive,
Yeah, exactly. But if Israel did what China was doing, if they offered Palestine a state of their own and help the Palestinian people, and made the Palestinians richer, all of that extremism problem would go away. But they'd rather bomb them and destroy their lives. I mean, this is just making them more extremists, right?
But the reality, AJ, is that Israel don't want to do that, because ultimately, and you've heard this from Israeli politicians, they basically want to get rid of the Palestinians altogether. Was it Egypt who they try at the start of this situation? What was the country they tried to get to open the border to get all the Palestinians to go there? Was it Egypt?
Yeah, Egypt. Yeah, the Sinai Desert in Egypt.
Yeah. The bottom line is, and you hear this the way the Israeli politicians speak, if Israel had their way, they just want to completely wipe out the Palestinians, because the mask has dropped, because their politicians have virtually said that, haven't they? And
sure.
So they have no interest in doing what China's doing.
Yeah, I wanted to also talk to you about Israel and China. What do the Chinese people think about Israel and the politicians? Because Israel and China did have a good relationship before all of this. I think Israel was supplying China with a lot of technology and weapons as well and stuff. How do you think this relationship will go forward from now?
My general feeling from talking to regular Chinese people is they are pretty upset at what Israel are doing to Palestinians. I think politically, China's line will just be, look, they will go down the peace line. I think China are probably working alongside Russia and a couple of the other BRICS nations to bring the South African case in the ICJ. I would imagine China are doing a lot behind the scenes, trying to negotiate some sort of peaceful settlement. That's what China are always about. We saw this with the Saudi-Iran deal. Very few people were aware that was going on until they announced it. And it was pretty big shock to the rest of the world. So I think China will never come out like they haven't with Ukraine. They still want to try and, maintain relations with Ukraine. And I think they will try and want to maintain relations with Israel. But I think they will try to work towards a peace where I feel the West have no interest in a peace. They say they do, but do they really?
Sure. I'm gonna how long do we have, Lee? Because I think we've
I'm okay to go for another 15, 20 minutes.
15, 20 minutes. Okay, we'll open up the questions in about another
Sounds good.
10 minutes. So any of you guys who want to kind of ask Lee any questions, send a request and we'll accept you in about 10 minutes.
Mhm.
But I just want to ask you a few more questions, really. I think I've asked you most of the questions, but yeah, I wanted to kind of talk to you about uh, mainly about like China. What do you
Mhm.
think? What do you think the world is moving towards now? I mean, with everything that's happening in Israel, and people are completely fed up with the West's double standards, and
Mhm.
they can see plain and simple the rules-based order is not working. The US is not the policeman of the world, because at the end of the day it's all about their interests and their allies' interests. Not, they don't care about the rest of the. So obviously we have BRICS now happening.
Yeah.
Do we see the future where there is a multipolar world where you have one side, which is Russia and China leading the global South, and you have the other side, which is the global West? I mean, what's your thoughts on how things are going to be progressing next 5, 10 years, 20 years?
I think personally that America and their allies or vassals, whatever you want to call them, are more and more isolating themselves. I think what's happened with Ukraine and what's happening now in the Middle East with Israel is a bit of a mask off moment. I think, the US have made some massive foreign policy errors. And I also think that there's all this talk that the West are decoupling from China. Well, I actually think it's the other way around. I think China are decoupling from the West. They're finding more and more other markets. Take Huawei, for instance, they've kind of almost given up on the US, but they're finding lots of new markets in the Middle East. Saudi are building this massive new digital city. Huawei have a lot of business there. Huawei are doing business with the UAE, with Iran, with Iraq. They getting to the point where they won't need Europe and America so much as they did in the past. And I think that more and more of the global southern countries realize that the most important thing is trade. I mean, you look at Korea are starting to feel the impact of being an American ally, for the first time in more than a decade. Korea's exports to China have dropped
Sure.
because of US sanctions. And I think at some point, a lot of the Southeast Asian countries are sitting on the fence at the moment
Yep.
because they don't want to piss off America. But I think their decisions will be swayed by the amount of trade they do. And I think the Belt and Road will make big inroads into Africa. There's some African countries which are still quite poor, which have started to become, their standard of living will increase. So China will do more business. I mean, don't get me wrong. When China go into these countries and build infrastructure, they don't do it for nothing. Just on a side tangent, this debt trap diplomacy stuff is just a load of bullshit. If you actually do your research, there's no debt trap diplomacy whatsoever. But China are not stupid. They don't go in and build things and expect nothing. It's a business deal to them. We'll build your infrastructure, but we want contracts for your minerals or your resources, which actually I think is fine. It's a win-win situation. Whereas if you look at what the West did in Africa, they just basically raped African countries of their resources and gave them very little, if nothing, in return. But I think the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be a massive shift in power. I think America and the West will lose more and more of their power, and I think China and the global South will gain power. So that's my thought on it.
Excellent.